Okay, it looks like it has started to slow down a little bit in the participant section. So we will go ahead and get started here tonight. So aloha everyone again, thank you so much for being here. Welcome to a special presentation, the vision for Olowalu-Ukumehame-Papalaua with Dr. Kim Falinski. We're all very excited that you're here. I'm Jill Wirt, your MC, and I'm a project manager at Maui Nui Marine Resource Council. Maui Nui Marine Resource Council is celebrating 14 years of working for clean ocean water, healthy coral reefs, and abundant native fish. Tonight's presentation is part of Maui Nui Marine Resource Council's monthly Know Your Ocean speaker series, usually held on the first Wednesday of each month at 5:30 p.m. via Zoom. This monthly series is supported by the County of Maui Office of Climate Change, Resiliency, and Sustainability. We invite you to submit any questions by using the Q&A button on the lower edge of your screen, and we'll leave time at the end of the presentation to answer any questions that you might have. And now it is my pleasure to introduce our presenter. Kim Falinski is an environmental engineer advising ridge to reef conservation projects in Hawaii and Palmyra Atoll for the Nature Conservancy. She focuses on green infrastructure solutions to mitigating sediment, nutrients, and pollutants from watersheds that affect coastal water quality. Recent projects include monitoring the effects of native Hawaiian restoration for a 200-acre wetland in Windward, Oahu, partnering with the USGS on erosion control management recommendations on Hawaii Island, and developing quality assurance documents for a large-scale citizen science water quality project in collaboration with the Department of Health. Falinski earned her BS at MIT in electrical science and engineering and PhD in tropical plant and soil sciences from the University of Hawaii. She has lived in Nepal teaching environmental science and English, and the Bahamas as a researcher and instructor at the Island School, part of the Cape Eleuthera Institute. In her spare time, she runs Nalo Mele Honey and keeps urban beehives in Honolulu. Thank you so much for being here, Kim, and I will let you take it from here.
Oh, thank you, guys. I'm really happy to be here. I'm often a listener on this seminar series, so it's kind of an honor to be here. So let me share my screen and then make sure you all can see it. We all good?
Looks great.
Awesome. Okay, well, I'm here today to talk about a new project, and so you might hear a stumbly presentation. I'm going to try my best. If it sounds stumbly, it's because there's an awful lot of excitement about the project that we're going to talk about. I'm going to be talking about Olowalu-Ukumehame-Papalaua and Nature Conservancy, along with our many partners' involvement to try to come up with a vision to figure out how to bring and restore this area to health. I'd like to especially thank my co-authors and the people who are really helping on this project, Makalea Ane, who couldn't be here tonight, Emily Fielding and Eric Conklin. Our team, which is on the slide here, is all these folks. Emily on the left there is our director of marine science in Maui, and Makalea is our community partner manager. And I've been trying to lead up some of the science-driven work for our Mauka regions. But these are the people that are trying on the ground in Maui to figure out the talk that you're hearing today. So Olowalu, why Olowalu? Many of you probably know that Olowalu was recently named a Mission Blue Spot by Sylvia Earle, but it also has a really deep history, which I often struggle to really do justice. It's an important place in Hawaiian history. You can read the little paragraph here written by Makalea, who couldn't be here. But the history of the place includes the many armies being able to march back through that valley there when they were in trouble during the days of Kamehameha, to be able to get to the other side and to safety. It was a breadbasket for this part of Maui, and it also supported many people. This peninsula here especially has had the historical berms of lo'i and other types of native agriculture that really went right up to the edge of the valley there. That's at least what the earliest historical accounts say. There's gardens, and you can read the rest of the history here. Sorry, this isn't my super expertise, but the Olowalu is a place that has been lived in for many, many years and cared for. And today, the ecosystem services that this place provides are ones that many of us know. It's a tourist destination. There are many people that come just to snorkel here, and many locals that come to fish. It's one of the healthiest reefs in this section of Maui. Recreation, those are Mokalea's kids on the upper right there playing in kayaks. It's a place to come, it's a place to surf, it's a place to be. And then the reefs offshore, which go farther offshore than in many places over along this West Maui coastline, offer coastal protection. So the existence of the reef is keeping the waves from coming too far inland and protecting us during big storms and hurricanes. The resources that we have here at Olowalu, many of you probably know, it was named a Mission Blue Hope Spot for a reason, and that the coral cover was one of the healthiest spots along the coastline here. The fishery is also productive, and it's one of the spots that's really known for its manta rays. So it has more manta rays, I think, that are especially used to have more manta rays than many other places in the Hawaiian Islands. Starting in 1870, the land that was once all lo'i and ulu and other native Hawaiian crops was starting to be transformed into sugar. So in 1870 was the first mill, and it ran all the way through 1931. And the old diversions that were used and created in order to feed the sugar plantations that were formed in Olowalu and Ukumehame were formed along the lines of the old kuauna that were used for some of the lo'i. So it's not like that just came out of nowhere. The diversions that were used from these streams, Olowalu and Ukume streams, were started to be diverted then and continue in many ways till today. There are some challenges, though, that this area faces that I think all of us who kind of spend a lot of time in this part of Maui understand. The road there is especially susceptible to a rising tide. So the State Department of Transportation has recently received $22 million to realign Honua Pi'ilani Highway, which is one of the first kind of retreat projects that are occurring in the state to try to move our coastal roads inward to kind of mitigate some of the sea level rise that's expected in the next 30 years. On the bottom right there is some of the predictions of kind of big picture, what we're looking at, but I think the top left photo, which many of us have actually seen on our king tides now, can see where that is coming from. And part of that comes not only from sea level rise, but also the fact that that area where the road was built itself was also a sand dune once. And so the dunes there are no longer there, which means there's less protection than there once was. In addition, in 2015, there was a major bleaching event. So the health of the reef, in addition to other factors, has been affected by kind of these larger global patterns of climate change. One of the main sources of stress to the reef, though, if you've driven along this highway and looked after a storm, is the sediment. So that Papalaua Gulch in the top right, if you get up close to it, looks like that. I mean, it's a denuding landscape that's kind of losing its cover, and it ends up in the ocean looking at like the picture on the left, right? Somewhere in the 1960s, there was a large retention basin formed that I'll talk about a little bit later that was used to try to catch the sediment kind of over by where Ukumehame firing range is. And so there is a retention basin there. You probably didn't notice it when you drive by. It just looks like a big hill, but there's a place where there's sediment being catched from this particular gulch, but it overflows. And so with that overflowing is creating this kind of the very thick red sediment that you see on the picture on the left. And here are some more photos of the storm from December that many of us know. So the plume from Kihei wraps all the way around. That's my favorite picture there. Thanks to Mokuhaluai Watershed Partnership for taking this photo right after the storm, showing how far the plume of sediment coming from Kihei can go. And then in the back of that picture, you can see the more red areas, and that's where those hot spots are that you can get up close. Thanks to Dofa on the left there for the drone imagery, you can start to see exactly how red that water was after a big storm. So in this little jewel here, the jewel goes from the area that we keep talking about, I'll laser point it for you, goes from here, right, all the way to here. So to those points. And so this bay in here has maybe 939 acres, I think, not to like be too specific about it. It has one of the largest reef tracts that we have along this coastline. And this is what it's getting covered with during big storm events. I'm going to give a big shout out right now to the Hui-O-Ka-Waiʻola, our local water quality group that's going out every 3 weeks, because part of the instigation for us really learning about the water quality here is having a 5-year data set that instigated some of these conversations too. The top right there is the picture of our turbidity data across all of these sites with that bright red line, the little red line that looks too low to be possible, kind of the state standard for what turbidity should be. So as we've reported out in some of our other kind of publicity, the turbidity along the West Maui coast is out of whack according to the Department of Health standards. But you can see from this photo that Ukumehame-Papalaua and Papalaua Pali, the 3 sites on the right and the photo in front of you, are definitely the sites that have higher turbidity that is more common and that the Hui is tracking for us on a regular basis. So using this, we can start to go on to follow-on solutions that I'll describe for you today and what kind of extra science we need to dig into these problems. So some of the other stress from above, we talked about the climate stresses from below are wildfire and access deer, which I'm pretty sure everyone is familiar with, but the tracts of land that are being burned in the Olowalu-Ukumehame area right now are thousands of acres, and it's occurring on an every 5-year interval. And the deer are moving over Maalaea Ridge there into the space as well, and denuding some of the landscape and eating the grasses down when there's a big drought. On the coastal side, there's more pictures of our flooding. That's what the Papalaua Beach Park looked like on the left there, and that's what the bleaching event looked like on the right there. So in an attempt to kind of save one of these big jewels of a coral reef system here and to protect it for all the ecosystem services that we lined out, we've been working along with many, many partners in the area to kind of highlight this particular place. So here's just a big fat list of all of the people who are working here. And I need to reflect back and to just elevate the words that I've heard Ekola Lindsay say recently to describe building people as a significant part of this. It's one thing to look at a landscape and say, oh, this is the problems, but it's another thing to think about the people aspects of this problem. And I really think that's an important part, is when we're thinking about a vision and a restoration, making sure that people are part of that. So, but I'm the scientist on this project, so you'll probably get a sciencey view, and I'm going to be talking today about trying to figure out, now that we have that Hui data, now that we have those beautiful drone shots, where are the sediments coming from? And then also adding to that, like, when are the sediments coming? When are they being delivered? And where are they going to? So kind of, is there a middle place? Is there a sponge that some of those sediments are sitting into? To do this, we've done some field surveys. We've looked at all of the existing data sets. We've worked with the USGS to come up with geochemical tracers, kind of the most technical piece of all of this. We've done hydrologic modeling to figure out where things might go. And we're working on collaborating to get coastal hydrodynamic modeling, which is just big fancy words for figuring out where water goes and where it's going to bring the sediment with it. So that said, kind of a plan means to figure out the bigger picture vision right now and where it's sort of the step one is to assess the sources and sinks of these stressors that we can get from the Mauka areas, and then to work with partners to agree on these findings and interventions. And then lastly, to think about how we can implement, which partners can we collaborate with to implement different types of mitigation and long-term monitoring. So I'll start with field surveys, but I'll even maybe take one little tiny kickback before field surveys and say that what you see, what people see, and stories that people share, the kilo that people are observing about when these sediments are hitting and where is really the cornerstone of all of the work you're going to see after this. So when people are able to tell me stories about where sediment is hitting, we can then back that up by going and investigating. So that kilo is super important. On the bottom left there is a community gathering in September at Kipuko Olowalu, and it was a big group of people who had deep roots into the place that could try to explain what happened in a flood 20 years ago, 50 years ago, what happened when this fire was, right? So no matter what kind of math you can do to try to do this as well, those kind of inputs are super important. On the right there, we were able to get USGS geomorphologist John Stock, who's worked in West Maui and probably presented here a couple times, to come out to the site and give his expert opinion on what kind of geological processes he thought were driving some of the problems that you see. And so taking all of these opinions in terms of field surveys was important. We then looked at historical land use to try to figure out how the history of the land and the history of the contouring of the land would have impacted today's, what we see today. And so to do that, we pulled down some of the 1885 maps, which you can already see those red circles there are outlining. I didn't put them there. Those were 1885 markers showing the extent of the sugar company's land acquisitions and probably the former extent of some of the agriculture that was there. On the right then, seeing what that looks like in terms of 1950, right? After the system had been mostly abandoned, and what was left, right? What kind of water transport system was left in 1950? And we're really digitizing these photos right now to be able to include them in our, just kind of like the bones of the system, right? What was underneath? And if I could have a map from the 1700s, that would be awesome, but I don't think we'll get there. Okay, so we have kind of like this historical land use, we have what people are seeing, but in order to get sediment down into the water, you need to have water move it there. And so kind of dug into the water data to try to see what the history was of these biggest peak floods, what kind of rain gauges we have, and what kind of history do we have for rain. And then on the right there, looking in the future and taking the work from PAHS and other partners at UH and the drought guys to figure out what we think is going to happen, right? On the right there, the takeaway from that kind of complicated map showing dry and wet and two different ways of looking at it, the takeaway is that it looks like Olowalu is one of those places where they say if it's dry, it's going to get drier. If it's wet, it's going to get a little bit wetter. That's at least kind of the biggest, broadest way of looking at these things. And so that the area that's we're looking at here, where's my laser pointer here for Olowalu, looks like it's going to be getting drier in the future in future predictions. On the left, I took apart all of the stream discharge data that I could find and found that between 1961 and 2008, even though kind of the story is those storms are getting stronger, I wasn't seeing those trends in the data. That said, I think if I maybe would extend this to 2022, I might start seeing more decadal scale changes, and looking at that storm from December timeframe might knock everything out of the park. So I'm looking forward to adding new data and continuing to monitor this place along with Seaworm, who has a bunch of instruments out there. So that said, if we're not entirely sure whether things are getting stronger, at least they haven't been getting stronger until 2008, but we know things are getting drier. We kind of went through and found all of the places that things had been measured before. So this is just a rain map of where you think rain's going to happen, where annual rainfall historically has happened, and then all of the places that are the kind of yellow squares right there and circles, the triangles, the green triangles. Those are all the places that currently are being monitored by Seaworm, so we can extend this data set and continue to answer these questions. And I hope to be able to present along with Erin sometime in the future about how things are changing. We also did a kind of an analysis to figure out where all of the water from all these places, all these different colors here represent different sub-watersheds. So if a drop of water falls into any of these, they'll end up in the system from that place. And all those little red dots along the coast down here, I'm going to bring my laser. All these little red dots along the coast here represented places where that water would touch ground. And this was important for me to start with, because then you can go walk the coastline and see, does the water actually make it across here at Ka'ili'ili? And the answer is yes, there's a culvert under the road. And same with Papalaua here, right? There's a culvert under the road. This is the retention basin. So going along and figuring out, well, okay, if you want to stop sediment, you can kind of either hold it here or you can stop it here. And if you're holding it here, well, you better know where it's going to try to go based on the modeling. And so this was the first pass of trying to identify all of the culverts that might be places where water can be stopped as you move along. So, okay, well, now we kind of have this generalized picture of water. We've taken out the historical land use, but now we're still kind of stuck with figuring out where the worst hotspots are on the landscape. And what people were telling us is that the hotspots were coming from the Papalaua area here on the Olowalu-Ukumehame-Papalaua Gulch. That when the storm happened, that the hottest red colors of sediment were here. And I'd love to hear people email me and tell me their stories of places they saw the water turn brown. Does Ukumehame turn brown? Right now, the consensus is that it's a brown color, not a red color, which means it might be moving down soil that isn't really cutting into these new fine soil layers. But Olowalu-Ukumehame, the observation was that it was bringing down this bright red dirt on a regular basis. And so we looked at the geology map. This was John Stock's inspiration to try to really dig into the geology. And what you see is that the late stage volcanics, these Honolua volcanics here, these are kind of the secondary lates, you know, when the volcano has kind of been a little bit sleepy, then all of a sudden you have these late eruptions. That's what this blue color is here. And the reason that's significant is one, because it has a different chemistry, which we can use to say, let's look at that. But two, because it has a different ash kind of deposition layers. And so this also might be important for that. So we took that apart and said, well, that's interesting that there's this different geological signature over on the right there. And there's a little tiny piece in Ukumehame too. This piece is if you look up at the mountain when you're driving by, that really sheer red cliff, that's what that piece is there from the late stage stuff. So we looked at that, and then we looked at the history of wildfire to see, okay, we'll do a fire walk, knock everything out and destroy all the vegetation. So this is all the big fires. Each of these colors is a different fire that's happened. There's some big fires, and pretty much everywhere has been covered with fire, but Papalaua in particular has been covered multiple times. Upwards of 5,000 acres have been burned at once. And then we said, okay, well, we can track that, right? We can track signatures in the soils using PAHs, because PAHs tell you if something's burned. And they're even better than that. They can tell you if something has burned due to a car or something has burned due to a wildfire, right? A natural fire versus kind of a car fire. So we use this PAHs to try to figure out which the fire is. And this is with Dr. Renee Takasui, who's really an expert on trying to piece apart these complicated chemicals. And those REEs, the rare earth elements, are the elements in that different volcanic signature you can see that would connect into the ocean. So right now, I'm not going to be able to present that data to you, and hopefully Renee will do that herself because she's much better at it. But we analyzed for both of those things by sampling at all these yellow points to try to figure out, okay, can I see if something on the landscape is going to get into the ocean? So we took ocean samples and we took land samples, and we looked at them to see if we could see these fire signatures and these geology signatures. And this slide is super complicated, so please just bear with me. But the takeaway is that, wow, we were able to see both the wildfire signatures and the ignition car signatures going out. And then the wildfire ones are these ones in clear. So they're not where you would expect, right? The wildfire ones are here and here, and then the vehicle ones are the ones that I guess are closest over here. So that meant to us that the wildfire signatures were coming here from Papalaua and Ukumehame only, but that the wildfire signatures weren't coming from here, but that we're able to see the cars, the effects of the cars coming down the Pale, and that the direction that all of the data was suggesting, and this is way more complicated than my little slide here shows, but that the direction of the flow of these materials in the water was going to be coming from here to here, which is what people were observing. And then on the bottom right there, I have a picture from that storm too. And you can see the way that the sediment moved, right? It moved the same direction. So that's this box here. And you can see the sediments moving this way. So the way the chemical signatures are, and there's so much more behind this, says that the water is likely moving this way, or that's at least where the sediment deposition is moving. So that's really helpful, because it says that, you know what, this place, this Papalaua Olowalu-Ukumehame, the sediments from here have the signatures that are ending up here, which means these places are connected. So that any kind of restoration in Papalaua and Olowalu-Ukumehame would help us protect the reefs that are really nice going in along this entire track. Another piece that we tried to add in was the work of Dr. Mark Dikos, who I might have presented here before. And so if you're seeing this again, well, it's good because it's complicated, and maybe you need to say it twice because I need to look at it over and over and over again. he deployed these drifters with the collaboration from the USGS2 out into the ocean, and then he followed them for 5 days to try to see where they were. So he tried these Olowalu ones, stayed at Olowalu. The ones at Ukumehame kind of went back and forth like this, and the ones that I can't say the name of that drainage very well, went like this, and then the big Manoa went like this. And so we were really trying to pull this apart, and would like to do it again just to see, okay, how does that affect where we think sediments are going to go during storms, after storms, like how does this work? But so there's an attempt to look at it from the drifter perspective too. And then some fancy modelers are going to come in and try to do this as well. But in the end, we're just trying to figure out, where does sediment go once it hits the ocean? So that's what this is helping us do. So the last piece I'll leave is just, okay, like if sediment is the stressor and we really just need to know where it's coming from, it helps to walk the landscape. And based on the observations we were seeing downstream, we wanted to walk upstream and try to figure out if we could see these really erodible soils. And so we were looking at soils and vegetation to try to figure this out. And we were trying to do it over this big 20,000 acre area. So you can't really walk everything. You can kind of just look for trends in the landscape. One of the most helpful ways of doing that was to look at the soils layer. And I've been doing this in other places, and usually the soils layer doesn't tell me a whole lot. It just kind of tells me general information. But this time, this soils layer had these bright orange, which are admittedly my coloring, but these bright orange soils happen to correspond to soils that soil scientists for the USDA had identified as highly erodible soils. So these soils here are the most erodible soils in orange, which is interesting because the first thing I noticed is that these orange soils that were considered the most erodible happen to be on my vegetation map. Sorry, it's not exactly the same perspective, but the areas that we were seeing the most amount of bare. So this light yellow color here corresponds, like you can see it right down here and right in here and right in here. So all of this area, if you start to look at the bare, where the bare earth spots are from satellite imagery, if you start to walk the landscape, if you look at that very first picture I showed you of Papalaua Gulch, are the places that we're seeing the most erosion. And so really, even from the soils perspective, those soils are most likely to go. These places are impacted by fire. They're impacted by deer that are coming over the mountain this way, and that they've been denuded to the point that some of those soils have been exposed. That isn't to say that I don't think that there's no sources in Ukumehame, but this map here represents all of the vegetation, and it's a work in progress for me because I'm still trying to take care of some of the shadows, which are the deep black areas. But the vegetation in the back of Ukumehame right now is there's a lot of vegetation on the ground, whereas the places that are completely exposed due to a combination of wildfire and deer and other practices are here in this plain, right? The Papalaua plain is flat and it's historically ash derived, so it's a very fine soil, and those soils are the most erodible. So if we're thinking about things, this area here is starting to stand out as one of the bigger spots that we can focus on to reduce erosion. So with that said, I'll go through summary in just 1 second. I just want to come back to this idea of you have to stop the soil somehow, right? So you can either stop the soil at the source and reforest that larger area and make sure things stay on the landscape. And I think that that's definitely part of the mission that we are setting out for ourselves with our partners. But the other part that you can do is also think about using the wetland system. All of this here is alluvial soil, meaning soil that's been deposited over time by streams and used to be a wetland. So historically, this whole area in front of Ukumehame stream was a wetland. And the extent of that wetland is not fully known, but we do know that as you drive by, like they've had to pump out water in the past. And that as you drive by, there's definitely still vegetation indicators that say, hey, this soil is wet for a lot of time. And if you talk to the Antis are telling us that this place has always been very wet and that has functioned as a wetland in the past. And so the opportunity to bring back this wetland and to try to capture some of those sediments and in that wetland space is an opportunity in the way you can kind of work on that buffer, the buffer between what's happening up in the mountains and what's happening in the ocean. So with all of that said, I think from the perspective of having to diagnose kind of the sickness that's coming from Mauka, like where is the sediment coming from? We use this kind of big toolkit of options from the geochemical analysis, trying to look at where the data is going, looking at the Hui's data to figure out that even though Ukumehame is the largest watershed by area, and it has some of the highest turbidity in the coastal zone, and I can explain that in one moment, but it is a different type of erosion problem there. The water is coming out slightly cleaner, and it isn't kind of an actively eroding place. At least that's what is being suggested so far. And whereas Papalaua has a soil composition and a geologic composition that would make it way more susceptible to being denuded and to eroding down into kind of the coast from there. And we're showing that connectivity so that it matters. That geochemical analysis with those PAHs, the polyaromatic compounds, that are showing that there is connectivity along the reef flat from some of those areas there. And then that last piece, my last point would be that there's retention capacity on the landscape. So it was a former wetland. We hope to see it working as a wetland, and that retention basin at Papalaua has capacity to hold sediments. But if you fill up a basin with sediment and then don't do anything else, then there's nowhere for the sediments to go except for out. So if you can take some of that away, then things improve. The only other thing I'll say that isn't on my slides, and it's new, it's brand new because I was diving there 2 weeks ago, is that in front of Ukumehame, there is that hardened surface, right? The Department of Transportation has hardened that area there, which is contentious, but you can see some of the scouring on the reef that comes from that, so that you have higher turbidity if you have a whole lot of wave action. So anybody who's surfed over there knows you go surf in front of Ukumehame, but that area as well, it has the kind of the bounce back from the hardened surface and the wave action there. And so all the sediments there have potential to be resuspended on a more regular basis. So considering the type of coast you have, whether it has dunes or not, is an important piece. Okay, so what happens now? Like if you have this, what happens now? We're going region by region is one of the ways we frame this, but there's lots of ways to think about it, whether you think Malco Makai or kind of going from south to north or something, but I'll describe stuff going to the kind of the things that we're thinking about right now as ways of getting in there and trying to stop the bleed and then stop the problem at its source. So the first is to think about Manawai Pueo. This is next to Papalaua parking lot there. And it's, there's so much sediment that built up after that last storm. And so cleaning it out and protecting it and making it so this is the place where all of the water ran across the road during the last storm because the culvert got all backed up. So at the very least, let's try to make this system work for us, right? There's a place where sediment can be stored, but if you look at this right now, that sediment is just waiting to go in the next storm. So let's figure out how to get back down to the bottom of this mini retention basin, how to fix that parking lot so that it doesn't just end up moving soil right away, and to figure out where we want to route the sediment so that it isn't just right there before we can fix the problem Malca. Malca, we can restore native forest and vegetation cover and go slowly by slowly, right? Get the deer out of there, make sure there's fire breaks, like take care of the land so that it doesn't have this problem in the long run, right? So that you can keep things on the land is a lot easier than trying to prevent it in the bottom. So we have great partners in this with Maui County Parks has been talking with us and DPW, and we really hope to be working on these county-owned areas more, along with the state-owned areas above. For Papalaua Gulch, going a little bit more now, there's that detention basin, which you can't see in this photo all that much, but the detention basin this is where Papalaua stream comes down, and there's a detention basin in here. So digging out that detention basin so it has more capacity, and then working the same way to fix the watershed, to work on deer control and fencing above and head cut stabilization. And those are with partners who are working in the watershed partnership with DOFA and Mount Kahalawai Watershed Partnership. For Ukumehame, going a little further, so here's that rock wall that's kind of adding to a little bit of the turbidity from what we can see in the coast and what the data is showing. So collaborating to figure out what happens when you move the road, right? I certainly am not the one to have the answers for that, but I can see the opportunity, and we can see the opportunity of being able to maybe take care of those wetlands a little bit better if the road wasn't right there. And to think about, there's a reservoir that's on the stream above, thinking about using that reservoir the way it once was, which was as lo'i and as indigenous agriculture. So if you have this open reservoir that's no longer a reservoir, was decommissioned, is it possible to use it to hold some of the high flows from Ukumehame as well? So that's sort of the things we're thinking about for Ukumehame proper. And there's a little bit of dune restoration. There's some options here for many partners. And for Olowalu, the last is that building people piece, particularly. So Kipuko Olowalu there has been leading the way to show people how to have a healthy riparian zone, how to have healthy lo'i, and how to move water through the system so that it can be reclaimed back. And that picture on the bottom right there is some of the other aspirations of this project. Everything I've talked about to date has just been Mauka and its effect on marine, but there you can try to assist marine directly, and this site has been identified as a site for coral restoration. And there's a partner there with Kuleana Coral and Maui Ocean Center and some others. And these are people who are interested in the same space of trying not only to protect the coral from these kind of Mauka stressors, but to think about the system at large. And with that, I'm going to give a shout out again to the Hui, just because they provided some of the data that instigated some of this work, or thinking about some of this work, but they have a new water quality report that you've probably already heard about. And I would like to also talk about this Brown Water Watch at Gmail. It's just an email address right now, but I hope you can see how much the drone imagery that we have so far has really inspired both understanding the source of the problem and where it's going. And so if you have a drone and you're interested in helping us by going out after the storms and taking pictures like this, but don't know where to put them, right now we're working on creating kind of the social media and email accounts needed for you to have a place to put them, because I love being able to see what things look like from the air. So the next time it rains a lot and you have your drone in your car and want to have a place to put those photos, we're working on creating this program to have a place to put those photos. So with that, I'm going to say thank you. And Emily Fielding joined us as well here. So hopefully she'll be able to answer questions that I can't. And I look forward to hearing what you guys have to say. Okay.
Wonderful. Thank you, Kim. Really great information and presentation. So I'll just give people some time to put any questions that they have into the Q&A box. And yes, Emily is here, so she can help answer questions as well. We did get one Q&A or one question in the box. Sarah asked what time of year were the drifters deployed, and I assume they mean Mark's drifters, if you can remember that.
I cannot, but if you give me a couple seconds, I might be able to dig it out.
Okay.
Yeah, for right now, I'm not sure I can remember. I want to say in the late summer, but I could be wrong. So sorry, I can't. Just give me a minute. I can look it up.
Yeah, no worries. Jeremy said that your presentation was excellent. Thank you so much. So much good information. It is always just good to learn more about the sources of the sediment, especially when that's kind of the main road really to get from central and upcountry Maui or South Maui over to Lahaina and Kaanapali. So we've all seen storm events and flooding in that area, and it's great to be able to learn more about the sources and some of the things that are being done to prevent that and remediate those areas. So thank you. Okay. Someone asked if you support a fire station in Olowalu.
Oh. Of course, and there's resourcing questions that I'm not sure are way above my pay grade. So yes, and let's just think comprehensively about what it would take. I think one thing that was illuminating when I was going through the fire data is how many of the point sources were coming from along the coast, and then because of the winds in the afternoons, they were able to be pushed up the mountain real fast. And so thinking about where fires are starting and maybe working to both figure out how to stop them, but also figure out how to stop the ignitions.
Great. Here's the sedimentation question. How much has sedimentation changed historically? Any idea the extent of brown water, say 200 years ago?
Yeah, cool question. So I thought about this a lot in West Maui, up at the top, Wahikuli, Honokawai. I haven't done the same analysis down here, but a long time ago, I did the analysis for up there. And what, when you have kind of a native ecosystem and a native agriculture system, the sedimentation events, there's always going to be an eroding mountain. It wouldn't look like this. There's a study that was done, which is one of my favorites, was done a long time ago by some geologists. They couldn't care less about what's happening today, but they took the volume of the volcano and then they did the same thing and looked at the volume today, and they thought about how much the earth had sunk during that time, and they calculated literally the volume of the valley and then divided it by how old the volcano was and said, aha, this is the rate, right? So the mountain's always going to come downstream. There was historically always sediment, and in some ways it was good. The sediment provided nutrients just like the groundwater provides nutrients. I think the major disruptions that we're seeing, I think John Stock says something like 100 times today of how much erosion would have happened historically. As soon as you start taking your vegetation cover off, it just exposes the surface to a rate that's so much higher than it once was. But if you're looking at, say, 1910 probably had a lot more erosion than we do now, because I bet they were just terracing that whole thing and pushing it off into the ditches and then coming down. So I'm guessing that it went through a PAHS where it had to survive sugar, and then what we're seeing today is a little bit less than full sugar. That's at least what our West Maui suggests.
Cool, thank you. Evelyn asked, is there any development happening in the area that could be problematic to this project?
I know that there were plans for a while for some parts of development, especially on the Olowalu side, and I haven't currently kept up with where those are, so I'm not sure. I'm not sure.
Okay. And the question from John, I believe the Hawaii Department of Transportation has received $20 million to work on moving the highway Mauka. Is there any interaction with Department of Transportation with this project?
Yeah, I'll speak briefly, but I bet Emily could answer this since she's been a bit more involved in that collaboration. We have been working with them, especially thinking about where the wetland boundaries are and about how much sediment is coming down, and thinking about at least providing that as an option. So as they consider their different scenarios, and those are public meetings as well, I believe the MPO meetings are public. So as they consider the different scenarios and the different logistics of having to move the road, they're taking as inputs some of the work that we're doing. But more than that, there's the Greenway plans, and I think that there's opportunity to consider a new vision for what happens once the road is moved as well. So both sides.
Emily,
Shall I come in?
Yeah, you please, Emily, you could answer that a lot better than me.
Yeah, no, it's Kim presented on the sediment part of the project today, which is just so rich in data, and you did a fantastic job. We are involved with DOT, Hawaii Department of Transportation, in the road moving project. It's they're moving into their EIS part of their process very soon, and we will be working closely with them to understand the natural ecological solutions that can go alongside with that road moving, such as wetland restoration, and understanding the coastal processes and how it all works, how the system works together in Maukana Makai, so that the ecosystem services and the natural solutions to help it, the coastal and upland environment be a healthier environment for people and for nature, is what we'll be working with them on, side by side, in parallel.
Great, thank you, Emily, for adding that. There is a question about any volunteer work. Do you need any volunteers for the Mauka work? I know that Kipuka Olowalu is always hosting volunteers, but I don't know if you had more on your side.
I would first level, I would go to Kipuku Olowalu, and again, maybe Emily has another one, but I think there's a bit of access issues still, but there might be opportunities in the future for some Mauka work as well.
Okay. And then yes, all of our presentations, this one is are shown on Facebook Live. So all of our presentations are available on our Facebook page as well as our YouTube. That was another part of the question as well.
Great.
Yes, that is one. There are lots of questions in here.
There are lots. That's why I'm just trying to see if there's easy ones I can answer.
Yeah, if you see one, please feel free. So maybe this was mentioned already, but what's the timeline for implementing some solutions for this project? I know there's so many components that go into it that it's hard to say sometimes.
I can chime in on that, on the timeline.
Please.
So
Yeah.
we've been working under NOAA habitat restoration funding for the last year. And that's what all this science that Kim presented was. So it's a big milestone right now to be able to present that science to you. In the next phase, in this next year, we'll be working with partners to cost out those implementation scenarios that Kim talked about, talk with partners about those, really look at what's possible, what's feasible, and start to get some of those things moving. Some of our partners are already moving forward funding requests, especially Division of Forestry and Wildlife under DLNR. So that's the year 2, is to really work on trying to get some of these implementation projects, in the pipeline. And then what the implementation timeline is for those is not currently known. For example, a place like Mauna Waipio Gulch, there needs to be design work and engineering work, right? And then that would lead to the next steps of that process. And Kim can speak more to that as an engineer. But in terms of like the years before we would start to see a project, some things are lower hanging fruit than others. So working with all partners on the most effective interventions with folks that want to work on it. So that's what this coming year looks like. In addition to continuing to collect important data, especially on wetlands.
Right. Yeah, collaboration is certainly important, especially in big areas like this that are very important. So I just commend all of the work that all of you are doing over there. It's a big effort. So keep on keeping on. It's great. Okay. Does the Cane Hall Road affect runoff?
That's a hard question. I'm not sure yet. I can say that any hard impervious surface that's going directly against the contour, contours to say it's going directly uphill, downhill, that moves water very, very quickly, would be generating a lot more runoff than say a natural surface. Whether that affects sediment and whether that's a sedimenty place may not be true, but it would definitely be affecting the amount of runoff that's coming off that surface. Yeah.
And this is something actually I was curious about as well, but if the retention basins were cleaned and removed, where would the sediment go? Because I know there's also sediment retention basins in West Maui. So if they're, where would the sediment go if it's being cleaned out of those?
Yeah, that's definitely a negotiation in a lot of ways on trying to find partners that are kind of willing to work together to receive said sediment. And often there's somebody who's happy to receive said sediment. You just have to find them.
Yeah.
So soil is a resource as well.
Right. This is good because you guys were just out in the water, and diving, has coral cover, or have you been able to tell if coral cover has increased since the 2015 bleaching event? And are there reef surveys or monitoring performed after the extreme flooding and sediment events after this past December?
Unfortunately, I can't answer these questions well, because what we were trying to do that isn't in this presentation, just because it's so brand new. Just 2 weeks ago, we did, TNC led some reef surveys and fish surveys going from Ukumehame to Papalaua and across that area. But it was specifically in an area that had not been surveyed before. And so I'm gonna refer you to Emily, help me here. Is it the West Maui reef report? Sorry, I should know the name of the report.
The atlas?
The atlas, thank you. I'm sorry, I'm just blanking on this word right now.
Oh,
there is a summary of the currently available data. What we did 2 weeks ago was a hole in the data that just had not been surveyed in a long enough time to create a baseline. How often we can get out there and whether we can time it to storm events is a bit iffy, but I think there's the more interest we have in looking at that resource, probably I take your point as it being an important piece of this.
Yeah, and those reef surveys, that the methodology that's used by TNC, DAR, and University of Hawaii, the Belt Transect surveys are meant to survey reefs of corals and fish and the benthic organisms over time, right? So we probably wouldn't be able to say anything about a recent event, but we'll see what kind of analysis they do of an event as recent as the December 2021 storm. But if you can access the Atlas of the Reefs of West Maui online, that's the name of it, and the primary author is Dwayne Minton. There's a section on Olowalu, and in that section you see an analysis of the data before, during, and after the coral bleaching, the major coral bleaching in 2015. So you can see the loss in coral cover and then some of the recovery. So in general, that's what happened, is we lost a lot of corals. But there was a certain amount of coral mortality and then a certain amount of corals that recovered. So in the beginning, it might have been 75 to 90% bleached. And I think the going estimates are about 40% of those corals were lost.
Great. Yes, that's a very comprehensive report as well. That shows all kinds of data from West Maui reefs. So that's available online. Thank you, Emily, for chiming in there and giving us that resource. So it is 6:26 and we are going to start wrapping up here, and we've gotten through pretty much every question. It looks like Kim is answering the last one, typing in the Q&A there. So thank you. And we'll go ahead and wrap up, but thank you both, Kim and Emily, for being here and answering some of those questions and providing such great context and background for the project that you have going on in Olowalu-Ukumehame-Papalaua. It's very inspiring and really great to hear from you both and see you both again. And we look forward to getting more updates as it progresses. So thank you again. We will, thank you. So we will go ahead and close out again. Thank you to everyone who was here tonight. This again was part of our monthly Know Your Ocean speaker series hosted with Maui Nui Marine Resource Council, sponsored by the County of Maui Office of Climate Change, Resiliency, and Sustainability. Our next Know Your Ocean speaker series event will take place on Wednesday, December 7th at 5:30 p.m. via Zoom. It will be our last one for 2022, and it will be a comprehensive webinar with all of the staff at Maui Nui Marine Resource Council to share about all of our accomplishments and efforts over the past year. All of our work would be impossible without all of your support. So thank you to all of our current, past, and future donors To sign up for this talk and to learn about future presentations, please sign up for a free subscription to our monthly e-newsletter, Reef and Brief, at mauireefs.org. And I can't believe it's November already, but the season of giving is approaching quickly, and it is a great time to support Maui Nui Marine Resource Council's work for clean ocean water and healthy coral reefs. And thanks to a generous longtime supporter, friend, and volunteer, your donation will have double the impact. Donate at mauireefs.org with the opportunity to receive an Aloha Collection hip pack or a Hui Zero reusable stainless steel takeout food tin. You can also support continued water quality monitoring by adopting your favorite beach or by becoming a trained water quality sampling volunteer. Hui Okavai'ola is a community-based water quality monitoring program launched and conducted by Maui Nui Marine Resource Council, the Nature Conservancy, and West Maui Ridge to Reefs Initiative in partnership with the State of Hawaii Department of Clean Health Water Branch. They test ocean water quality every 3 weeks at 29 locations in South and West Maui. You can visit Hui Okavai'ola for more information. When you donate to Maui Nui Marine Resource Council, you'll also be supporting our work to improve the ocean water quality in Ma'alaia Bay. Our projects include our oyster bioremediation project, which has caged oysters in the bay, filtering sediment and other pollutants out of the water. When you adopt 75 oysters, you can receive this beautiful oyster shell ornament that makes a great gift for the holidays. And if you've missed some or all of tonight's presentation, you'll be able to view it on Facebook Live on our Maui Nui Marine Resource Council Facebook page. It will also be posted on our YouTube channel, Maui Reefs. And last but not least, we want to thank our sponsors and supporters who are making our work possible. And we also wish to thank individual donors like you for taking the time to be here on a weeknight evening. Mahalo for making a difference. Thank you all for joining us and have a wonderful evening. We'll see you all next month. Aloha.